Hi, darling. Today we are reading in chapter 15, the Holy Instant, in section 5, the time of rebirth, and verse 5. It is not necessary to follow fear through all the circuitous. I don't know how to pronounce that. Routes by which it burrows underground and hides in darkness, to emerge in forms quite different from what it is. Yet it is necessary to examine each one as long as you would retain the principle that governs all of them. I'm going to pause and say that's very interesting. It's very interesting that it would imply that even though it emerges in all kinds of different forms, fear shows up in many different manifestations. We only have to examine each one as long as we are retaining the principle that governs all of them, their root. When you are willing to regard them not as separate, but as different manifestations of the same idea, and when you do not want, they go together. That sounds really nice. Instead of spending the next thousands of years, however long, going through each fear one by one, just let them all go in one fell swoop. The idea is simply this. You believe it is possible to be host to the ego or hostage to God. I'll pause here and say that's interesting because in the workbook for students, it says that our choice is to be host to God or hostage to ego. That's the only choice. It's interesting that it has it reversed here, that we believe it's possible to host the ego and be hostage to God. This is the choice you think you make. This is the choice you think you have, and the decision you believe that you must make. You see no other alternatives, for you cannot accept the fact that sacrifice gets nothing. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation, apart from sacrifice, means nothing to you. I'm going to read that again because this is really fascinating. This is a very profound philosophical and psychological premise. Sacrifice is so essential to your thought system that salvation, apart from sacrifice, means nothing to you. Your confusion of sacrifice and love is so profound that you cannot conceive of love without sacrifice. And it is this that you must look upon. Sacrifice is attack, not love. If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. Wow. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. For if there is sacrifice, someone must pay and someone must get. And the only question that remains is how much is the price and for getting what? As host to the ego, you believe that you can give all your guilt away whenever you want and thereby purchase peace. And the payment does not seem to be yours. While it is obvious that the ego does demand payment, it never seems to be demanding it of you. I'll pause here and say that's kind of funny, right? Because to the ego, everyone else is wrong and an idiot, and we're always right? The self, the small self. You are unwilling to recognize that the ego, which you invited, is treacherous only to those who think they are its host. The ego will never let you perceive this, since this recognition would make it homeless. For when the recognition dawns clearly, you will not be deceived by any form the ego takes to protect itself from your sight. Each form will be recognized as but a cover for the one idea that hides behind them all. That love demands sacrifice and is therefore inseparable from attack and fear, and that guilt is the price of love which must be paid by fear. Wow. I mean, it sounds insane when you put it that way. Guilt is the price of love which must be paid by fear. And that we believe that love demands sacrifice. These are really interesting concepts. I remember first reading these and going, that's not true. That's not how I think. But when I would go deep enough, I would realize, wow, that really is what's the root of that. I really do, on some level, believe the twisted lies of ego. And when I act from ego, when I am attacking or judging or condemning and making others wrong, or I'm even just perceiving problems, perceiving things wrong with the world and with others, I would see how pernicious and sneaky my ego is. The ego, I'm not even going to claim it as mine, just the ego, this paradigm, this thought system, this program, is so pernicious and so sneaky that it will create the problem it's claiming to solve. Every time. Start paying attention. Next time you see a problem and you go out to fix it, when you go out to change, force, and coerce, watch the ego create the very problem it claims it's going to solve for you. Every time. It's wild. When I finally saw through that, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It blew my mind. I was like, when I finally saw through that, it was like a veil was lifted. I was like, oh my gosh, the ego's insane. And I've been listening to it. Good news is, A Course in Miracles offers us an alternative thought system. If you would accept but this one idea, your fear of love would vanish. Guilt cannot last when the idea of sacrifice has been removed. There is no sacrifice in love. So if we believe that we are sacrificing something or giving something up for love, it's a lie. We're sacrificing or giving something up for ego. Love doesn't demand sacrifice. Now, I guess you could say, well, what about a mother taking care of her child? Is that a sacrifice? Or is that a treasure? Is that a joy? If we're looking at it as a sacrifice, then we are looking through the lens of ego. If we are looking at it through the lens of love, then it's an honor. That's just one little example. You can apply it to anything in your life where you feel like you're sacrificing. And I invite you to either stop doing that or to reframe why you're doing it. Well, beyond reframing, simply find that deeper motive. Find the motive of your soul, which is love, because the ego doesn't have that. The ego's motive is sacrifice and guilt and condemnation and making other people's wrong and putting itself above or below others. It's sneaky and it's pernicious. So I invite you to join me, and I'm going to be doing this as well, over the next few days when we notice that we're feeling self-sacrificing or put upon or unhappy with circumstances. Is it something we need to simply stop doing because love does not demand sacrifice? Or is it something that we have the opportunity to go deeper and find our true and real motive? And if it's coming from love, it will not involve sacrifice. Thanks for being here with me today. I love you so much. Please share in the comments if you have any thoughts or questions about this. There's so many different variables and all of our lives are so different. There's not really any way to cover all of the different situations we're in. But this is a true principle and we can find a way to apply it in our own personal individual lives. Thank you so much for being here.